Hi, this is part two of the illusion of control as I'm delving into some issues related to faith and mental health on the weekends. Looking forward to getting back to some things for the school community on Monday. In the first part, we just did a quick little summary of where faith comes from and the fact that everybody has faith, even if you don't believe in a particular God, and that everybody's faith has some version of cause and effect in it, that we believe that we should be in control of things, that somehow we're supposed to be able to control situations and outcomes. Where we get into trouble and where anxiety and fear enter into our conversation is when there are things that we cannot control, when there are unknowns, when we don't know what's going to happen. And so we're going to go a little bit deeper with that, and we're going to start off with something that is a harsh reality. And the harsh reality, and I'm just jumping right to it, so grab your coat and your hat, because here we go. Everybody's story ends the same. Now I'll say it again. Everybody's story, the story of their life on earth, ends the same. This is an absolute truth that is really difficult for us to process. And it's not the kind of thing you say at a funeral, but it's true. And your story is going to end the same, and my story is going to end the same, and everybody's story ends the same. Now, we do everything we can to work against that. So we can lengthen a story, but we cannot, and we never will be able to control the end of the story. We work really hard to control that story by taking care of ourselves physically. We have amazing health care in our world today, just astonishing health care. We have medications that have allowed us to live much longer lives. But when the lifespan was, the expected lifespan was in the 40s, and now the expected lifespan in our country, in America, is in maybe the 70s or even the early 80s, the story still ends the same. And this is the ultimate puzzle that we are not able to solve, and the ultimate source of really all of our anxieties and our fears. And so this may be a stretch to process in a video like this, but my contention is this: all anxiety, all fear is a derivative of our anxieties about death. Because death is the ultimate situation in which we are not in control. When the illusion of our control completely comes apart. Because at some point, the story ends. And so we have this kind of thing in our culture. Well, I'll use it. There was one of the government officials from Europe was making a comment about the coronavirus. And he said, we're going to do everything we can, but we all need to acknowledge that many people are going to lose loved ones before their time. And I thought, no, that's their time. Like, if their story ends, their story ends. And to say it's before their time doesn't even make sense unless we think we can control the end of life. Unless we actually have embedded in our understanding that we can prolong the story and ultimately have a story that doesn't end. Like, otherwise, but we say that, don't we? We say that at funerals. Well, it must have just been their time. I've heard that before. Well, in this case, government official, maybe it's their time as well. And so let's look at this not from a point of view of the coronavirus, but let's look at this as an explanation for why it is we think we're in control and why we get anxiety when we're not. Why fear comes up when we're not, or anger, or sadness, or even guilt, like we should have done something more. Death is the ultimate expression of it's not supposed to be this way. So it's like we were made to live. Now, this is a part of my theology. This is part of my understanding of faith, is that being created in the image of God, we were created for life. We weren't created to die. And there's a whole story in the Old Testament about how death entered the world, and a whole story in the New Testament about how God, through Jesus, redeemed and gave life back to people so that we could have the promise of eternal life. But our physical life on this earth still has the same story. And we all deal with a certain sense of it's not supposed to be this way when we face the issue of death. So anxiety then just becomes an expression of our inability to control outcomes, and it gets more than that. We actually think that those outcomes matter. So when I deal with kids at school, for example, and they may have anxiety about what are people going to think if I do this, or what would people say, or what happens if I make a mistake, or what if I can't do it, or what if I'm not able, or what if I die? Like these what if questions, we function in a way that we should be able to control those outcomes. So then when we face those unknowns, we try to develop a strategy to cope with them so we can control the outcomes. So if you have, say, social anxiety, you might be a person who goes into yourself and doesn't interact with people because then you're controlling the judgment of other people that you're afraid that you won't be able to measure up with. In a sense, this is a fear of death. Now, death is the expectation that we would live or that things would be the way we're supposed to be. Social anxiety is an expectation that people ought to accept us, and if they don't accept us, there's something wrong with me, and so I better just avoid interacting with people because of the way it makes me feel. I'll control the outcome by not interacting. We all got aspects of this, and it's all based on this idea that everybody's faith, and again, this is true for people of God and people who don't know anything about God, have a component of if-then thinking. And it works like this. If I do this, then this will happen. If I follow the rules, then I will get good outcomes. If I am kind to people, then people will be kind to me. And this, by the way, is a wonderful way to live your life. Like, you should think about these things. And it works really well with things like saving money or doing good in homework or keeping a job. Like, if I show up on time and if I work hard, then I will keep my job and be able to bring money home for my family. Good stuff. It's a great way to live your life. It's a terrible way to explain your life. And it's a terrible way to explain your life because when you then go backwards and bad things happen that you weren't in control of, you can begin to believe that it must be because you didn't do the if correctly. This is a perfectly seen in a story in the book of John where Jesus and his disciples come across a blind man. And this happens in John chapter 9, if you want to look this up later. And Jesus' disciples, they come across this man that's blind, and it says he was blind from birth. And the disciples said to Jesus, "Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And you see the if-then thinking. If there's a bad outcome, there must have been bad input. Some of us function like this all the time, and it's a major source of guilt for many people because bad things happen and we think it must have been because I didn't try hard enough, work hard enough, pray hard enough, I didn't something enough. But actually, Jesus gives us a perfect answer, which is this. It didn't happen because of sin. The world is broken. It's a broken place. And what happened in this man's life, as what happened in your life, as what happens in anybody's life, is an opportunity for God's grace, God's power, God's goodness to be shown. Jesus just says, no, your if-then thinking, that ain't right. Like, that's not the way it works. Now, right now, we're seeing a lot of this in various kinds of social media sorts of statements, as well as in the things that are being said on the news. So you're hearing this from Christians right now. You're hearing this from Bible-believing people who are pulling out verses out of the Bible. For example, 2 Chronicles 7, 13 and 14, which says that God is saying to the people, if I send a plague of locusts, or if I send a plague on the people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, I'll restore their nation. And so Christians are saying, we're having this plague because of the fact that we didn't pray enough or we didn't humble ourselves. And they're saying, if we do this, then God will. Now, I'm not saying that's a right or a wrong thing. I'm just saying, do you see the undercut of it? Do you see the underlying assumption that is behind the faith? Because the scientific community, maybe some of whom, maybe government people who aren't invoking God at all, are saying, if we quarantine, if we isolate, if we social distance, then we will have less of a plague. We will be able to control the plague. We will not get sick. All of which reflecting an underlying assumption that we should be in control of this. Now, should we social distance? Awesome. Scientists are saying to do it. I think it's not a bad idea. And if the whole world's after it, we probably ought to listen to the scientists. They probably know what they're talking about. Would it be a good idea for people to really reflect on who God is and maybe spend some time in prayer and realize that, wow, we maybe haven't taken seriously who God is? I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think that's going to hurt anybody. But the if-then thinking that somehow we ought to be in control of it is reflected on both sides, both those who believe in God and those who don't believe in God. That's our faith. And what we're discovering in this situation, as everybody discovers in their own situations, is that we're not in control as much as we thought we were. That things happen that had nothing to do with our decisions or the decisions even around us. And we need an answer for that. I believe that answer is Jesus. I believe that answer is a faith in God. And in the other parts of this, there'll be two other parts of this, let's look into how we can get to that place and maybe an opportunity for you to investigate your own faith. I'll see you in a bit.